The 80-20 rule explained. What if 80% of your results came from only 20% of your actions? And what if you're spending most of your time on the wrong things? Many people work harder every year, but still feel like they are not making real progress. They stay busy all day. They answer emails, they attend meetings, they check messages, they multitask. Yet at the end of the day, they feel exhausted but not satisfied. Why does this happen? Because most people focus on the wrong tasks. And that's where the 80-20 rule comes in. The 80-20 rule is also known as the Pareto Principle. It was discovered by an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. In the late 1800s, Pareto noticed something interesting about wealth distribution. He observed that about 80% of Italy's land was owned by only 20% of the population. Later, he discovered the same pattern in other places. For example, in his garden, he noticed that 20% of the pea plants produced about 80% of the peas. This pattern appears again and again in many areas of life. In business, roughly 20% of customers generate 80% of profits. In productivity, 20% of tasks create 80% of results. In learning, 20% of knowledge produces 80% of understanding. In other words, a small number of inputs often create a large number of outcomes. This insight can completely change how you work and live. Instead of trying to do everything, successful people focus on the few activities that produce the biggest results. Let's look at an example. Imagine a business owner running an online store. They spend time doing many different tasks every day: answering emails, posting on social media, designing graphics, managing inventory, updating the website. But after analyzing their sales, they discover something surprising. Most of their revenue comes from just a few products. In fact, only 20% of their products generate 80% of their sales. This means many of their activities are not contributing much to growth. So instead of trying to improve everything, the smart strategy is to focus on the best-selling products. Improve those products, promote those products, expand those products. By focusing on the most impactful areas, the business grows faster with less effort. Now let's look at productivity. Imagine a student preparing for an exam. They try to study every chapter equally. But after reviewing past exam papers, they realize that a small number of topics appear repeatedly. Those topics represent the core concepts of the subject. If the student focuses more time on those key topics, they can understand most of the material faster. This is the 80-20 rule in action. The same idea applies to time management. Think about your daily tasks. Some tasks move your life forward. Others simply keep you busy, checking notifications, scrolling social media, attending unnecessary meetings. Answering messages that do not require immediate attention. These activities create the illusion of productivity, but they rarely produce meaningful results. High achievers think differently. They constantly ask one question: which activities produce the biggest results? Once they identify those activities, they prioritize them above everything else. For example, if you are building a YouTube channel, the most important activities might be creating valuable content, improving storytelling, designing better thumbnails, understanding your audience. But many creators spend most of their time doing less impactful tasks, like checking analytics every few minutes or obsessing over minor details. The 80-20 rule reminds us that not all efforts are equal. Some actions have far greater impact than others. Another powerful example appears in relationships. Think about the people in your life. You might know hundreds of people, but usually a small group of friends and family members create the majority of your happiness. These are the people who support you during difficult times. They celebrate your successes. They encourage your growth. Spending more time with these meaningful relationships often brings greater satisfaction than trying to maintain superficial connections with everyone. The 80-20 rule also appears in learning new skills. For example, if someone wants to learn a new language, they might feel overwhelmed by thousands of vocabulary words. But research shows that learning the most common 1,000 words allows you to understand the majority of everyday conversations. Again, a small portion of effort creates a large portion of results. Understanding this principle allows you to work smarter rather than harder. Instead of increasing effort, you increase focus. Instead of doing more tasks, you choose better tasks. But applying the 80-20 rule requires awareness. You must analyze where your time and energy go. Ask yourself, which activities create the most value? Which tasks produce the most progress? Which habits generate the best outcomes? Then focus more of your time on those activities. At the same time, reduce or eliminate low-impact tasks. This shift can dramatically improve productivity. Many successful entrepreneurs use this principle when building companies. They focus on a few key priorities rather than trying to manage everything at once. Many investors follow the same rule. Instead of owning hundreds of investments, they concentrate on a few strong opportunities. And many creators apply the 80-20 rule when producing content. They analyze which topics perform best and create more content around those ideas. This principle does not mean the numbers are always exactly 80 and 20. Sometimes it may be 70 and 30. Sometimes it may be 90 and 10. But the core idea remains the same. A small number of inputs create the majority of results. Once you understand this pattern, you begin to see it everywhere, in business, in productivity, in education, in relationships, and in personal growth. The biggest mistake most people make is trying to do everything equally, but the 80-20 rule teaches us something different. Focus on the vital few rather than the trivial many. Because when you focus on the activities that truly matter, your progress becomes faster, easier, and more meaningful. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by a long list of tasks, remember this principle. Not everything deserves your time. Find the 20% that creates 80% of your results, and focus your energy there. That simple shift can transform how you work, learn, and live.